Welcome to the Dr. Carolyn Coker-Ross Show, awakening your full potential and expanding your understanding of how to live fully and joyfully by making conscious choices that promote and maintain vitality in all areas of your life. Now here's your host, Dr. Carolyn Coker-Ross. Please be sure to listen to this episode in an environment that is safe. Do not listen to this recording while driving a car or operating any kind of machinery.
Welcome to the Vital Life Radio. Today I have guest Dr. Edward Abramson, who is an internationally recognized expert on eating and weight problems. His new book is It's Not Just Baby Fat, 10 Steps to Help Your Child to a Healthy Weight. And this book shows parents how they can encourage healthy eating and help their kids break away from TV and video games while promoting a positive body image. He is a professor emeritus of psychology at California State University and the former director of the Eating Disorder Center at Chico Community Hospital. Dr. Abramson is a clinical psychologist who's worked extensively with parents concerned about their children's eating and weight, and he is the author of 5 books and 25 scientific publications. So welcome to the show, Dr. Abramson.
Thanks for having me on, Dr. Ross. I really appreciate it.
You're very welcome. So I want to get started on this very interesting topic. As everybody knows, childhood obesity is a big focus in our country, along with adult obesity, and it's something that we don't know exactly how best to deal with. And, for most adults have been on diets to deal with their weight problem. But you're saying that children who are overweight or obese shouldn't be put on a diet. Why is this?
Well, there's ample evidence that it actually backfires. One study that was done in Northern California followed high school girls from the first year of high school through the end of graduation. And they matched them for weight, and the girls who were on a diet actually gained more weight than equally heavy girls who weren't dieting. And dieting presents all sorts of difficulties for kids. So it really is not the best way of approaching a child's weight problems.
Well, I think many parents feel that they have to do something, but sometimes parents aren't exactly sure whether their child is overweight or whether they're just going through getting ready to go through a growth spurt. How can you tell the difference?
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And in fact, many parents don't recognize when their kids are overweight. And it's not an easy judgment because kids grow at different rates. So, it may be that, a child is going to have a growth spurt later. The best way of doing it, and it's not foolproof, is the Centers for Disease Control has a website which enables the parent to put in the child's age, specifically in months, and the child's height and the child's weight, and then it will calculate what the BMI is for the child at that age, and then determine what percentile that child is at compared with other kids of the same age. And then it's typically defined as being obese if the child is at the 95th percentile for his age or higher, and if the child is somewhere between 85 to 95 percentile, then that's thought of as being at risk for being overweight. Mm-hmm. But if you had to actually try and calculate that yourself, it would be really difficult. But fortunately, the CDC has a website that'll do all the calculations for you.
Well, I think it can be very confusing. I always tell a story when I talk on my speaking circuit about having 3 sons, and all 3 of them would have been described as, chunky or husky, and, buying husky clothes at some point in their life, usually around 13 and 14. Somewhere in that neighborhood, they all looked kind of plump. And lo and behold, the following year, every single one of them went through growth spurts and, in 2 cases went from about 5 foot 2 inches tall to over 6 feet tall. And thin and muscular. So had I become concerned and started, trying to get them to diet, I think that would have been the wrong
it
thing
wouldn't have
to
helped.
do. No,
Right.
it wouldn't have helped, and it may have hurt. And a lot of, I know in your book, and you and I both work in the eating disorder field, you talk about how many of these attempts to get children to lose weight can lead to eating disorders or, the use of extreme methods for dieting.
Yeah, it's particularly risky when mom is concerned about her own weight and has a history of going on diets or joining Weight Watchers or doing taking some of the pills to try and lose weight. And then she becomes concerned that her daughter looks a little chunky, and so she, decides that the two of them should diet together, or they swap diets, or go to a program together, and that sometimes can really cause problems because if you look at the history of young women with eating disorders, frequently there's a kind of a connection between mom's dieting and mom's concern about weight and their own maladaptive eating behaviors.
Yeah, and I noticed that many parents don't feel that they don't understand or recognize that their comments about their own body affect their children as well.
Yeah,
And
really, if mom is looking in the mirror and making negative comments about her body, or constantly asking, "Does this make my butt look big?" or other kinds of concerns like that, what she's doing really is modeling a negative body image for her daughter. Her daughter then will start looking and saying, "Does this make my butt look big?" And when teenagers especially become concerned about their weight, then they sometimes resort to extreme measures for controlling their weight, which is, unhealthy.
yes, exactly. But, many parents do have valid concerns, and one of them is that we know that there's a lot of fat phobia in our culture, and there's quite a big bit of stigma against people who are overweight or obese, and they also know that their kids may get teased or bullied at school because of their weight or size. So how do you handle these very valid concerns that parents have, for example, about kids getting bullied at school?
Yeah, that is really a tragedy. And sometimes kids who are being bullied or picked on because of their weight, they feel so embarrassed and humiliated that they might not even tell their parents that this is going on. So I think a parent can ask, and then kind of an open-ended question, how are things in school, or something along those lines, and then just kind of listen to what the child is saying, and also observe, is the child tending to withdraw? Because, obviously if a kid is being bullied, then he or she is likely to pull away from other kids. But then it's helpful, I think, to discuss it with a child, and you can help your child deal with it. One of the obvious things is to not respond. If a child is being teased and then cries or gets angry or whatever, that kind of just reinforces the bully who's doing the teasing. And sometimes it's not tattling to tell a trusted adult what's going on. So a child could, for instance, tell the teacher that she's being subjected to humiliation in class.
Well,
and then
how do you talk? I'm sorry, go on.
Yeah, I was going to say also it's helpful for parents sometimes to encourage the child to get involved in other social activities, after-school activities, join the Girl Scouts or Boy Scouts or a church group, because kids who are bullied or teased frequently withdraw, and then they tend to eat more. So if the parent can help facilitate social interaction with a child, I think that would be beneficial.
Well, I'm glad you said the latter, because I think one of the things that happens with bullying is that it does affect the child's self-esteem and how they feel about themselves and their body. And so I think another thing that helps is to have a parent who doesn't just focus on, or doesn't focus at all on appearance, but talks about other things that the kid is good at or good qualities that they have, and helps them to build their self-esteem in that way.
Yeah, one of the things that happens with eating disorders frequently is that anything that is negative going on typically in a girl's life, she then attributes to the fact that she's too heavy or something along those lines. And so we really do want to emphasize that life is more than just, appearance or weight.
Mm-hmm. And I always tell my eating disorder patients that body image concerns are never about their body. They really are a distraction from whatever else is going on in their lives. So we have a few minutes before our break, and I just wanted to talk about a question that I get, or a comment that I get from parents all the time when I speak on this topic. And they feel that they're depriving their kids when their kids are not allowed to, quote unquote, have goodies or treats that the other kids have, or get to eat at a junk food place or eat fast food. They feel it in some way that they are depriving their children. How do you address that concern?
Yeah, no, that's a very valid concern. If everybody is, if all his friends are stopping on the way home from school to have a Slurpee, what's the child supposed to do? I think the message that we really want to communicate with our kids is not never, but rather on occasion. And so rather than say, this is a bad food that we never eat, this is something that we reserve for occasional treats. And so if everybody else is having a Slurpee, okay, you can have a Slurpee. But then maybe cut back later on in the day.
And how do you define the difference between a treat and, regular foods? Because some parents feel that their kids should get treated every day, the milk and cookies after school kind of deal.
Yeah, I think it's helpful to recognize that snacking is fine. I mean, if the child has lunch at 12 o'clock and dinner isn't until 7, he or she is going to need a snack sometime in the middle of the afternoon. But a snack is different from a treat. A treat is a food that you eat purely for an enjoyment. A snack is something that you eat because you're physically hungry. So I think it's perfectly okay to have fruit when you come home from school, or nuts are particularly good because they keep you feeling full longer, or some other relatively low-calorie snack, and then save the cookies for dessert, for instance, as a treat. And it's also helpful, I think, if you're going to be eating those high-calorie treats, to eat them when you're not hungry, because then you're less likely to binge on them.
I'm here with my guest, Dr. Ed Abramson, who is a well-known expert on eating and weight problems. He has appeared on many national TV shows, including ABC News 2020 with Sarah Ferguson, the Duchess of York. He's also been interviewed on more than 50 TV and radio programs, including Hard Copy, Good Day, L.A., Mornings on 2, and The Joan Rivers Show. He's the author of a new book, It's Not Just Baby Fat, 10 Steps to Help Your Child to a Healthy Weight. And you can learn more about Dr. Abramson and his books on www.dredabramson.com. So we were talking before the break, Dr. Abramson, about parents and bullying, and also about the difference between snacks and treats. I liked in your book how you talked about how you think of foods like traffic lights, and I wondered if you could share that with our listeners.
Yeah, that's not original. I can't claim credit for that. But for younger kids, I think it's helpful to talk about red lights, yellow lights, and green lights. And green lights are foods that are not calorically dense. So this would typically be fruits and vegetables, beans, lean chicken, fish, etc. Yellow foods or yellow light foods are foods that are high in nutritional value but are calorically dense. So, that we would put some limits on cheeses, red meats, things along those lines. And, of course, the red light foods are foods that are calorically dense but don't have a lot of nutritional value. And here are the typical junk foods, ding-dongs, ho-hos, etc.
Twinkies.
Twinkies, yeah, my all-time favorite, Twinkies.
Yes, the ones that can last in your pantry for 20 years.
Yeah.
So what do you think is the biggest mistake that parents make when they're trying to help their children with their weight?
Well, I think parents frequently will, again, focus on dieting. And I tell parents to banish that word from their vocabulary. We don't have to use that word, but rather we can talk about healthy eating. And the nice thing about healthy eating is that's something that would benefit everybody, so it doesn't have the stigma attached to it that a diet does. Even skinny kids would benefit from healthy eating. I think that the biggest mistake is to focus just on dieting. But other things that I think are unhelpful are when parents or teachers or, uncles, aunts, whomever, make well-meaning comments that are supposed to be humorous about a child's weight. Frequently they will think they're doing this for the child's own good, but it really does impact the child's self-esteem, and that's not very helpful.
Yeah, there was a large study, Diane Newmark-Steiner's Project EAT study. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but she talked about one of the markers of future disordered eating was being teased by a family member or peers.
Exactly. Sometimes one parent was telling me that they brought their daughter in to see the pediatrician, and she was a bit overweight, and the pediatrician said, you really need to go on a diet. And then at the next visit, several months later, the kid was almost anorexic.
Yeah.
Sometimes a simple comment will really trigger extreme dieting behavior with really negative consequences.
Well, of course, working with eating disorders, I see that a lot. I had one patient with bulimia whose dad used to, jokingly call her Miss Piggy.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, and, I'm sure in his mind he was trying to get her to focus some awareness on this, but it certainly wasn't helpful in terms of what later happened. And I also see one mistake that I think is huge is where a parent will kind of pick on one child because of their weight. So maybe they have two daughters, and one daughter takes after the thinner parent and one takes after the heavier parent, and they will kind of make that child the identified patient, so to speak, in the family. Yeah. So everything revolves around, getting that child to lose weight. And I think it's
interesting how sometimes conflicts that are below the surface tend to emerge or crystallize around issues of weight. Maybe the parent is unhappy with a child for some other reason, but the simplest thing to talk about is the child's weight.
Or maybe the parent is unhappy in their marriage or at their job. It may have nothing to do with the child,
exactly.
Right?
Yeah, it could be the child's weight becomes a source, the focus for almost any type of frustration in the family.
Yeah. So in your book, you talk about 10 steps that will help your child to a healthy weight. So how do you, for example, get your child to eat vegetables? I was talking to a colleague who's a medical doctor, and she struggled with her weight all her life, and she has a son who's, slightly overweight, and she has tried to force him, cajole him, bribe him.
Didn't work.
No, and none of those worked.
Yeah, I think the first thing to recognize is that when a kid refuses vegetables or, for that matter, any new food, it may not be that the child is just being stubborn or willful. We're born liking sweet tastes, and we really have to learn to like anything, foods that aren't sweet, and that's part of our biological makeup. It's not because we're being difficult. And so recognizing that, I always tell parents, if a child refuses to eat vegetables, don't make a big deal out of it. Don't go into lectures or threats or cajoling or bribing. Back off and try again next week. Sometimes it takes 10 or 15 or maybe even more repetitions before a child will actually try a new food. And so there's no point in making this a source of conflict. One thing that parents can do, in addition, is to actually enjoy the foods themselves. I mean, if they're having dinner with a child and the child sees mom and dad really getting into, the carrots or, whatever the vegetable is, it's more likely that he or she will be curious about, what mom and dad seem to be enjoying.
Now, sadly, many parents haven't been, many parents have weight issues themselves, and they haven't been in the habit of eating in a healthy way. So they're trying to tell their kids to do something that they are not doing, and that doesn't work.
This is really an example of you've got to walk the walk. You can't just talk the talk. Mm-hmm. The same is true with exercise. You can't tell your kid to go out and run around while you're sitting on the sofa. Mm-hmm. But, the other thing that I will sometimes tell parents about eating vegetables or other new foods is to have the child help prepare them. On a Saturday afternoon, if you're making dinner and you've got a recipe for a vegetable dish, ask the child to help you in the kitchen and cut up the vegetables or, do whatever to prepare the dish. And then when it's dinner time and the dish is served, it's much more likely that the child is going to want to try something that he or she has been helping with.
Mm-hmm. So one of the other big issues in terms of reaching a healthy weight has to do with activity. And I read in your book that you actually were a kid and maybe even a teenager or maybe a young adult
I plead guilty to having been a kid.
An exercise avoider, huh?
Oh, yeah. I was really bad about that, I have to admit. When I was
impressed with the clever ways you found to get out of exercise, like offering to do something else during gym class to help
I
teacher.
Volunteered to take attendance during the gym class, so I actually didn't have to do anything that was physically active. And when I think it was 5th or 6th grade, and my dad tried to sign me up for Little League baseball, and I complained and threw a fit, and eventually he backed off, and we just went home.
So looking back, what could your parents have done differently to get you to exercise?
Well, one thing that would have been nice, my folks were both very busy, but it would have been nice if we had done something together as a family. I mean, we all had bicycles. We could have, gone for bike rides or played ball together, something along those lines. My dad liked to hike, but, typically he did that with one of his pals, and it probably would have been better if it was more of a family outing.
Mm-hmm. Are there other things that parents can do to encourage their children to exercise more and to get off the couch?
Yeah, I think one of the simplest things, the American Academy of Pediatrics recommends that for kids, 2 hours of screen time should be, for most kids, should be a sufficient limit. And many parents don't even attempt to limit the amount of time that kids spend with television or sitting at the computer. And, even if the child doesn't follow perfectly, it's helpful. I think there's evidence that just saying, okay, 2 hours a day is the max, and trying to enforce it, even if it's not done perfectly, has a beneficial effect.
And I think kids are no different than adults in terms of sometimes using TV and video games to distract them from emotions or problems they have. And our guest today is Dr. Ed Abramson. We're talking about his latest book, It's Not Just Baby Fat, 10 Steps to Help Your Child to a Healthy Weight. And this is a great little book. If you're a parent and you're thinking, oh, my goodness, I couldn't read a whole book on this topic, you'll be surprised. It's really a very quick read and has extremely useful advice. So it's something that you can pick up and read very fast. And if you want to find out more about the book, you can go to the website www.itsnotjustbabyfat.com. And on that site, you can also find that CDC calculator to determine if your child is at risk for being obese or overweight. So, Dr. Abramson, I wanted to find out, what is your opinion about the school-based programs to deal with childhood obesity?
It's a mixed bag. There have been some horror stories where the nurses in a school have actually done like public weigh-ins of the kids, which I imagine would be incredibly humiliating. On the other hand, there is a lot that schools can do to help fight the obesity epidemic, and it really is an epidemic that potentially is going to be a real disaster. I mean, about a third of kids in the U.S. are overweight or obese. The incidence of type 2 diabetes, I think, has increased like tenfold in the last decade. So we could be confronting a major public health problem here without it, if we don't kind of do something about it. So school is a good place to start. And some of the things that I think have been beneficial is that in some school districts, for instance, they've taken out the vending machines that have soda and junk foods and substituted more healthy snacks. And a certain amount of nutrition education, I think, is helpful, and of course physical activity. But unfortunately, when money gets tight, sometimes gym is one of the first things that they cut back on.
Yeah, many schools no longer have PE in the younger grades, and I think that's a shame because kids are sitting all day, and many of them have difficulty being still for 6-8 hours a day and get diagnosed with ADHD.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I don't like to sit all day. I don't know about.
I don't think anybody does. I think it's an unrealistic expectation that we have of our kids.
Yeah, and I think parents can, in addition to the school-based, parents can look at how they can increase just ordinary movement during the course of the day. It doesn't even have to be exercise or playing sports, but just walking or going up the stairs or moving around instead of just sitting and watching. Really what we want to do is to get kids moving as opposed to being sedentary.
Well, what's been interesting to me is some of the newer research that's showing that childhood obesity actually starts before birth. So what a child, what a fetus is being fed through the mother can affect their risk for obesity. And you also talk in your book about the breastfeeding advantage. So what are your thoughts about those two?
Yeah, well, first of all, we need to recognize that there is at least a genetic component. I mean, we may inherit a tendency to gain weight more easily, or we may inherit a tendency to be hungrier sooner. So there is a genetic component to it. But there do seem to be some effects of the intrauterine environment. And certainly what happens early on in life is important. For instance, there's evidence that breastfeeding is protective against childhood childhood obesity. And it may be, if nothing else, I mean, there probably are several reasons why that's the case, but if a child is breastfed, the child gets accustomed to having different tastes, depending, of course, on what mom has been eating. On the other hand, if a child has been bottle-fed, the child experiences the same taste day in and day out. And so as the child gets older, if he or she has had the experience of different tastes, it may be easier to introduce new foods to the child, as opposed to if a child has had only one taste throughout infancy, then they may be more resistant to trying new foods.
So it's really important that women who are pregnant make a concerted effort to eat more healthily for the sake of their children. I also saw or talked to someone from Sweden, I believe it was, and they say in that country they consciously feed their babies Swedish yogurt, which is very sour. You know, it's not like our yogurt, which has been, you know, you put a lot of sugar in it.
Yeah.
But it's very sour, and they do that for the express purpose of changing their taste so they won't crave sweets as much.
Yeah, that's kind of an interesting idea, to introduce a sour taste early on in life.
Mm-hmm. I also have seen that many children are becoming obese even at the age of 2 years old. How do we explain that? I mean, most of the time kids, you know, have their own internal monitor of how much to eat and what not to eat. So how could a 2-year-old become overweight or obese?
Well, more than likely, mom is interpreting the child's crying as hunger when, in fact, the child may be crying because, you know, the diaper needs to be changed, or she's cold, or something scared him, or something like that. But mom hears the crying and then, you know, provides a bottle or feeds the child.
Mm-hmm. Are there other times in a child's development where the risk for weight gain is higher? I know you talk about puberty causing weight issues for girls, but not necessarily for boys.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting. When a boy is, let's say he's the first one in his group to reach puberty, and so now, you know, he's got facial hair and his voice is changing, he kind of becomes the leader of the pack because he's mature. He's starting to be more manly than, you know, his childish peers. On the other hand, when a girl is the first one in her group to reach puberty, she has a newly rounded shape, and she may misinterpret that as fat and become self-conscious. And, you know, if she really does see that as just as getting fat, then she may go on a diet and maybe even do, you know, really restrictive kinds of dieting behaviors, but you know, and then wear kind of bulky clothes to hide her newly rounded form and feel bad about it.
It seems that in our families there's not much conversation about, you know, normal growth and development. And, you know, I mentioned earlier about my sons who were, you know, chunky when they went into puberty. And when we went, at one time, went to shop for school clothes, and one of my sons had to get husky clothes, and he looked at me and said, "Mom, does this mean that I'm fat?" And lucky for me, this wasn't my first, you know, child, and so I had a ready answer because I had been down that road before. And I did give him some education. Well, this is what your brothers went through, and this is how our family grows, and it's normal, and, you know, and he was okay with it, and it didn't seem to affect his self-esteem. But it seems that many parents either don't understand normal growth and development, or their pediatricians are, you know, giving them the message your child is fat, so they need to diet. So when an expert tells a parent that, what's the best way to handle that? Or tells a child that?
It's a tough spot to be in. You know, one thing I always encourage parents to do, parents of girls, is to explain the changes that come with puberty well before they get there. And girls are reaching puberty at younger and younger ages.
Some as young as 9.
Yeah. No, that's not unheard of at all. And so I think, having a discussion about that beforehand, I think, is very helpful. Recognize that, again, children grow at different paces, and you really want to focus on what the child is doing rather than the child's weight. So if the child is active and seems to be eating a healthy diet, then I wouldn't get too concerned about it. On the other hand, if the weight seems to be a result of excessive snacking and junk food eating, then maybe it's time to look at changing some of that.
Is it important for parents to limit sort of junk foods or treats in the home? In other words, don't buy that stuff that is not so healthy, or only buy it infrequently. How would you set up your house to make it healthier?
Yeah, I think that's really an important point, because we really need to structure the home environment to produce the kind of eating that we want to see. And so, I tell parents, try not to have that food in the house. If Dad has to have, a brownie or something like that, rather than buy the brownies, Dad can, have a brownie on his lunch break at work, and so you don't have to keep it in the house. If you do have to have snack foods or junk foods, dessert or whatever, I think it's helpful to buy single serving. So rather than, for instance, buying a half gallon of ice cream, buy an ice cream, a box of ice cream sandwiches or ice cream cups or something like that, so you know what the portion size is. Because a lot of times the problem is in controlling portion size. People tend to eat more when the portion is not really well defined. And so if you have a half gallon of ice cream, there's no place, that tells you it's time to stop.
And many people feel that a big bowl of ice cream is a normal serving.
Yeah.
Whereas it's really a cup, which is a very small amount. Well, we're going to be going to break here pretty soon. I'm here with my guest, Dr. Ed Abramson, and we've been talking about childhood obesity and his new book, It's Not Just Baby Fat, 10 Steps to Help Your Child to a Healthy Weight. So, Dr. Abramson, I just had a few more questions, and
Sure.
I know that one of your first books was on emotional eating, and many of our children are experiencing a lot of stress, it seems, and I wonder, how can a parent help their child who they know or see is overeating because of their emotions or because of their stress?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing is for a parent to not use food. Lots of times we use food as a reward or as a treat after a kid has had an unpleasant experience, gone to the dentist and or gotten an injection at the doctor's office, and to kind of console the child, we head to Baskin-Robbins, and that's not too helpful. And so I think that's kind of a background. But lots of times I think a parent can just simply ask a child, are you really hungry, or are you just kind of sad or not feeling, too happy? And the child will sometimes be able to make the distinction between eating from hunger versus eating just to soothe oneself or make oneself feel better.
Is it useful if, because sometimes children aren't real sure in the moment what they feel, is it useful to say to them, well, before we get the ice cream, let's just go for a walk, or to do something else with them, and then if you still want the ice cream, we'll get that?
Yeah, no, I think that's an excellent idea. Frequently we can find other activities to substitute for eating. The child may just want some nurturing and or attention from mom or dad. Maybe playing a game or going for a walk or doing something that has mom or dad's undivided attention may be better than having an ice cream.
Hmm. And I know for boys, it's often hard for them to talk about their feelings unless they are involved in an activity. I read somewhere that, if you go out and play ball with your son, then he's more likely to talk to you than if you're just sitting on the couch.
Yeah, when my kids were young, frequently when we were out for a walk or just even driving in the car one-on-one, to run an errand of some sort, then I ask an open-ended question, and my son or my daughter would tell me kind of what's going on in school today, and we could talk about how that felt, and I think that was a lot better than, offering ho-hos or ding-dongs, because you're feeling kind of sad.
Right.
On my website, it's not just babyfat.com, there are a bunch of hints, helpful techniques, I think, that parents can use to help their kids with the tendency to be emotional eaters or to the reluctance to eat vegetables, or some of the things we've been talking about this morning.
Yeah, I think that's a good resource for parents. One of the other things I just wanted to mention is that there's a fair amount of research now that sleep deprivation in children can be as strongly associated with the risk for obesity.
Yeah, it's not actually just with kids. With adults, too. Sleep deprivation seems to be associated with weight gain. Whether there's a physiological underlying reason for that, or whether it's just that when people are feeling stressed and worn out and tired, they may use food to try and boost their energy level, is not clear. But there does seem to be a definite link between sleep deprivation and weight gain. So the moral of the story is to make sure that your kid is getting enough sleep.
And it seems that I know I read one study that showed that a child's sleep pattern, a young child's sleep pattern can almost foolproof be a predictor of their later weight. And I know many parents don't value sleep for themselves, and this may be part of the problem when children are very overscheduled with activities and expectations. So how much sleep should a child who's like in, elementary school be getting?
Yeah, there are recommendations for a newborn somewhere between 10 to 18 hours, preschooler 11 to 13 hours, a kid 5 to 12 years of age, maybe 10 to 11 hours. For teens, it's particularly difficult because they are programmed to stay up later and to sleep in, but frequently, they have to be at school at 8 o'clock, and so they're staying up late but then getting up early and not getting the 8 or 9 hours sleep that they ideally should have.
And I think for adults that it's 7 to 9 hours minimum to reduce the risk for obesity. One of the other things that is in your book is mindful eating, and we talk a lot about this in adults, especially those who have eating disorders. But what does mindful eating for children look like?
Again, it's really focusing on the experience. We tend to eat with the TV on while we're driving in the car. It's rushed, it's snacked, and we really lose sight of what it is that we're doing. And I think there's every reason for us to really pay attention, to stop, focus on our eating, and to enjoy the food and recognize the sensations that the food provides so we know when to stop.
Mm-hmm. So is mindful eating more of eating meals around a table with the family? Because I know Newmark Sainer's Project Eat, she also said that eating at least one or two meals a week was helped reduce the likelihood of eating disorders. Is it about eating with the family, or is it about enjoying the meal more, or what is the benefit of this mindful eating for kids?
All of the above.
Okay.
Eating with family meals, unfortunately, are disappearing, and it's one of the nicest rituals. It's, I tell parents, this is not the time to bring up to discuss the bad report card or the chores that weren't done. Mealtime time should be a pleasant experience, a time to share the day's activities, and to enjoy the food and the good feelings that come from it with your family.
Yeah. So mindful eating is really about experiencing the food and experiencing the social aspect of eating as well.
Yeah, as opposed to gobbling, rushing, or eating while watching TV. I always tell parents to turn off the TV when it's dinner time.
Yeah, and that's a hard one for many people to do.
Yeah.
Well, we just have a minute left, and I wondered if you had any other tips about helping improve how kids feel about their bodies. We've talked a little bit about, focusing on other things.
Even if the child is overweight, parents can find something about the child's appearance that they value. Even if the child really is obese, maybe he has a nice smile, or she has pretty eyes, or they dress nicely. And so there's nothing to be gained by making a child feel badly about his or her body. It doesn't help with weight loss. We want the child to feel good about her body so that she doesn't develop an eating disorder, and actually that may help in sticking to some kind of reasonable eating plan. I've got more hints on the It's Not Just Baby Fat website, as well as a link to the CDC calculator for parents to figure out if their kid is too heavy.
Well, good. Well, thank you so much for being on the program, and that's about all the time that we have today. So I wanted to thank our guest, Dr. Ed Abramson, and remind you his book is called It's Not Just Baby Fat. I'm your host, Dr. Carolyn Coker-Ross, and next week I'll be with you with Dr. Michael Murray, who's a naturopathic physician who is a specialist in nutrition and health, and he'll be talking to you about how what you eat can heal you or make you sick. So until then, I wish you good health and vitality.
You have been listening to the Dr. Carolyn Coker-Ross Show. Please visit CarolynRossMD.com. That's CarolynRossMD.com to access podcasts, show archives, and more about Dr. Ross and her services.